Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya. Shuklambaradharam Vishnum Shashivarnam Chaturbhujam Prasannavadanam Dhyayet Sarva Vignopashantaye. Karunapurna Sudabdhe Kabalita Ghana Vishwarupa Kiranavalya Arunachala Paramatman Aruno Bhavachitta Kanja Suvikasaya Vande Sri Ramana Maharshi Acharyasya Padabjam Yo me darshayadhisham Bhantam dhvantamatityaha Akhanda Satchidanande Parabrahmanya Laukike Vilasantam Gurum Nomim Sarvada Hridyaham Bhaje. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya. This is a recording of Upadesa Manjari or spiritual instruction taken from the collected works of Sri Ramana Maharshi. Introduction. Sri Natanananda, one of the earliest devotees, noted down the conversation which took place one day between Bhagavan and his devotees. These were then arranged and expanded and shown to Bhagavan, who appreciated them. They were then published under the name of Upadesa Manjari or spiritual instruction. Invocation. I seek refuge at the sacred feet of the blessed Ramana, who performs the entire work of creation, preservation and destruction while remaining wholly unattached, and who makes us aware of what is real and thus protects us, that I may set down his words fittingly. Importance of the work. Worshipping with the instruments of thought, word and body the sacred lotus feet of Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharshi, the very embodiment of the beginningless infinite supreme Brahman, the Satchidananda, existence, consciousness, bliss, I have gathered this bouquet of the flowers of his instructions, Upadesa Manjari, for the benefit of those who are foremost among the seekers of liberation and who are adored by learned persons, in order that they might adorn themselves with it and attain salvation. This book is an epitome of the immortal words of that great soul, Sri Ramana Maharshi, whose teachings entirely dispelled the doubts and wrong notions of this humble person, even as the sun dispels darkness. The subject of this book is that eternal Brahman, which shines as the pinnacle and heart of all the Vedas and Agamas. That incomparable self-realization, atmasiddhi, which is praised by all the Upanisads and which is the supreme good to be sought by all noble aspirants, brahmavids, is the theme of this work. Chapter 1. Instruction. Upadesa. 1. What are the marks of a real teacher, Sadguru? Steady abidance in the self, looking at all with an equal eye, unshakable courage at all times, in all places and circumstances, etc. 2. What are the marks of an earnest disciple, Sat-Sishya? An intense longing for the removal of sorrow and attainment of joy, and an intense aversion for all kinds of mundane pleasure. 3. What are the characteristics of instruction, Upadesha? The word Upadesha means near the place or seat. Upa, near, Desha, place or seat. The Guru, who is the embodiment of that which is indicated by the terms Sat, Chit and Ananda, existence, consciousness and bliss, prevents the disciple who, on account of his acceptance of the forms of the objects of the senses, has swerved from his true state and is consequently distressed and buffeted by joys and sorrows, from continuing so, and establishes him in his own real nature without differentiation. Upadesha also means showing a distant object quite near. It is brought home to the disciple that Brahman, which he believes to be distant and different from himself, is near and not different from himself. 4. If it be true that the Guru is one's own self, Atman, what is the principle underlying the doctrine which says that however learned a disciple may be, or whatever occult powers he may possess, he cannot attain self-realization, atmasiddhi, without the grace of the Guru? Although in absolute truth the state of the Guru is that of oneself, it is very hard for the self which has become the individual soul, jiva, through ignorance, to realize its true state or nature without the grace of the Guru. All mental concepts are controlled by the mere presence of the real Guru. If he were to say to one who arrogantly claims that he has seen the farther shore of the ocean of learning, or one who claims arrogantly that he can perform deeds which are well nigh impossible, yes, you learnt all that is to be learnt, but have you learnt to know yourself? And you who are capable of performing deeds which are almost impossible, have you seen yourself? Questioned thus, they will bow their heads in shame and remain silent. Thus it is evident that only by the grace of the Guru and by no other accomplishment is it possible to know oneself. 5. What are the marks of the Guru's grace? It is beyond words or thoughts. 6. If that is so, how is it that it is said that the disciple realizes his true state by the Guru's grace? It is like the elephant which wakes up on seeing a lion in its dream. Even as the elephant wakes up at the mere sight of the lion, so too is it certain that the disciple wakes up from the sleep of ignorance into the wakefulness of true knowledge through the Guru's benevolent look of grace. 7. What is the significance of the saying that the nature of the real Guru is that of the Supreme Lord, Sarveshwara? In the case of the individual soul which desires to attain the state of true knowledge or the state of Godhood, Ishvara, and with that object always practices devotion, the Lord, who is the witness of that individual soul and identical with it, comes forth when the individual's devotion has reached a mature stage in human form with the help of Satchitananda, his three natural features, and form and name, which he also graciously assumes, and in the guise of blessing the disciple absorbs him in himself. According to this doctrine, the Guru can truly be called the Lord. 8. How then did some great persons attain knowledge without a Guru? To a few mature persons, the Lord shines as the light of knowledge and imparts awareness of the truth. 9. What is the end of devotion, bhakti, and the path of siddhanta, that is, Saiva Siddhanta? It is to learn the truth that all one's actions performed with unselfish devotion, with the aid of the three purified instruments, body, speech, and mind, in the capacity of the servant of the Lord, become the Lord's actions, and to stand forth free from the sense of I and mine. This is also the truth of what the Saiva Siddhantins call Parabhakti, supreme devotion, or living in the service of God, Irai Paninitral. 10. What is the end of the path of knowledge, Jnana, or Vedanta? It is to know the truth that the I is not different from the Lord, Ishvara, and to be free from the feeling of being the doer, Kartrutva Ahankara. 11. How can it be said that the end of both these paths is the same? Whatever the means, the destruction of the sense I and mine is the goal, and as these are interdependent, the destruction of either of them causes the destruction of the other. Therefore, in order to achieve that state of silence which is beyond thought and word, either the path of knowledge, which removes the sense of I, or the path of devotion, which removes the sense of mine, will suffice. So, there is no doubt that the end of the paths of devotion and knowledge is one and the same. Note: so long as the I exists, it is necessary to accept the Lord also. If anyone wishes to regain easily the supreme state of identity, Sayujya, now lost to him, it is only proper that he should accept this conclusion. 12. What is the mark of the ego? The individual soul of the form of I is the ego. The self, which is of the nature of intelligence, Chit, has no sense of I. Nor does the insentient body possess a sense of I. The mysterious appearance of a delusive ego between the intelligent and the insentient, being the root cause of all these troubles, upon its destruction by whatever means, that which really exists will be seen as it is. This is called liberation, moksha. Chapter 2. Practice, Abhyasa. 1. What is the method of practice? As the self of a person who tries to attain self-realization is not different from him, and as there is nothing other than or superior to him to be attained by him, self-realization being only the realization of one's own nature, the seeker of liberation realizes, without doubts or misconceptions, his real nature by distinguishing the eternal from the transient, and never swerves from his natural state. This is known as the practice of knowledge. This is the enquiry leading to self-realization. 2. Can this path of enquiry be followed by all aspirants? This is suitable only for ripe souls. The rest should follow different methods according to the state of their minds. 3. What are the other methods? They are stuti, japa, dhyana, yoga, jnana, etc. Stuti is singing the praises of the Lord with a great feeling of devotion. Japa is uttering the names of the gods or sacred mantras like Om, either mentally or verbally. While following the methods of stuti and japa, the mind will sometimes be concentrated, that is closed, and sometimes diffused, that is open. The vagaries of the mind will not be evident to those who follow these methods. Dhyana denotes the repetition of the names etc. mentally, japa, with feelings of devotion. In this method, the state of the mind will be understood easily, for the mind does not become concentrated and diffused simultaneously. When one is in dhyana, it does not contact the objects of the senses, and when it is in contact with the objects, it is not in dhyana. Therefore, those who are in this state can observe the vagaries of the mind then and there, and by stopping the mind from thinking other thoughts, fix it in dhyana. Perfection in dhyana is the state of abiding in the self, that is, abiding in the form of that. Tadakara nilai. As meditation functions in an exceedingly subtle manner at the source of the mind, it is not difficult to perceive its rise and subsidence. Yoga. The source of the breath is the same as that of the mind. Therefore, the subsidence of either leads effortlessly to that of the other. The practice of stilling the mind through breath control, pranayama, is called yoga. Fixing their minds on psychic centers such as Sahasrara, that is the 1,000-petaled lotus, yogis remain for any length of time without awareness of their bodies. As long as this state continues, they appear to be immersed in some kind of joy. But when the mind, which has become tranquil, emerges, becomes active again, it resumes its worldly thoughts. It is therefore necessary to train it with the help of practices like dhyana whenever it becomes externalized. It will then attain a state in which there is neither subsidence nor emergence. Jnana is the annihilation of the mind, in which it is made to assume the form of the self through the constant practice of dhyana or enquiry, vichara. The extinction of the mind is the state in which there is a cessation of all efforts. Those who are established in this state never swerve from their true state. The term silence, mauna, and inaction refer to this state alone. Note: all practices are followed only with the object of concentrating the mind. As all the mental activities like remembering, forgetting, desiring, hating, attracting, discarding, etc. are modifications of the mind, they cannot be one's true state. Simple, changeless being is one's true nature. Therefore, to know the truth of one's being and to be it is known as release from bondage and the destruction of the knot, grandhinasam. Until this state of tranquility of mind is firmly attained, the practice of unswerving abidance in the self and keeping the mind unsoiled by various thoughts is essential for an aspirant. Although the practices for achieving strength of mind are numerous, all of them achieve the same end. For it can be seen that whoever concentrates his mind on any object will, on the cessation of all mental concepts, ultimately remain merely as that object. This is called successful meditation, dhyana-siddhi. Those who follow the path of enquiry realize that the mind which remains at the end of the enquiry is Brahman. Those who practice meditation realize that the mind which remains at the end of the meditation is the object of their meditation. As the result is the same in either case, it is the duty of aspirants to practice continuously either of these methods till the goal is reached. 4. Is the state of being still a state involving effort or effortlessness? It is not an effortless state of indolence. All mundane activities which are ordinarily called effort are performed with the aid of a portion of the mind and with frequent breaks. But the act of communion with the self, atma vyavahara, or remaining still inwardly, is intense activity which is performed with the entire mind and without break. Maya, delusion or ignorance, which cannot be destroyed by any other act, is completely destroyed by this intense activity which is called silence, mauna. 5. What is the nature of Maya? Maya is that which makes us regard as non-existent the self, the reality, which is always and everywhere present, all-pervasive and self-luminance, and as existent the individual soul, jiva, the world, jagrat, and God, para, which have been conclusively proved to be non-existent at all times and places. 6. As the self shines fully of its own accord, why is it not generally recognized like the other objects of the world by all persons? Wherever particular objects are known, it is the self which has known itself in the form of those objects. For what is known as knowledge or awareness is only the potency of the self, Atma Shakti. The self is the only sentient object. There is nothing apart from the self. If there are such objects, they are all insentient and therefore cannot either know themselves or mutually know one another. It is because the self does not know its true nature in this manner that it seems to be immersed and struggling in the ocean of birth and death in the form of the individual soul. 7. Although the Lord is all-pervasive, it appears from passages like adoring Him through His grace that He can be known only through His grace. How then can the individual soul, by its own efforts, attain self-realization in the absence of the Lord's grace? As the Lord denotes the self, and as grace means the Lord's presence or revelation, there is no time when the Lord remains unknown. If the light of the sun is invisible to the owl, it is only the fault of that bird and not of the sun. Similarly, can the unawareness of the self, which is always of the nature of awareness by the ignorant, be other than their own fault? How can it be the fault of the self? It is because grace is of the very nature of the Lord that He is well known as the blessed grace. Therefore, the Lord, whose nature itself is grace, does not have to bestow His grace, nor is there any particular time for bestowing His grace. 8. What part of the body is the abode of the self? The heart on the right side of the chest is generally indicated. This is because we usually point to the right side of the chest when we refer to ourselves. Some say that the Sahasrara, the thousand-petaled lotus, is the abode of the self. But if that were true, the head should not fall forward when we go to sleep or faint. 9. What is the nature of the heart? The sacred texts describing it say, between the two breasts, below the chest and above the abdomen, there are 6 organs of different colors. One of them resembling the bud of a water lily and situated 2 digits to the right is the heart. It is inverted, and within it is a tiny orifice which is the seat of dense darkness, ignorance, full of desires. All the psychic nerves, nadis, depend upon it. It is the abode of the vital forces, the mind and the light of consciousness. But although it is described thus, the meaning of the word heart, hridayam, is the self, Atman, as it is denoted by the terms existence, consciousness, bliss, eternal and plenum, Sat, Chit, Anandam, Nityam, Purnam. It has no differences such as exterior and interior or up and down. That tranquil state in which all thoughts come to an end is called the state of the self. When it is realized as it is, there is no scope for discussion about its location inside the body or outside. 10. Why do thoughts of many objects arise in the mind even when there is no contact with external objects? All such thoughts are due to latent tendencies, purva samskaras. They appear only to the individual consciousness, jiva, which has forgotten its real nature and become externalized. Whenever particular things are perceived, the enquiry, who is it that sees them, should be made. They will then disappear at once. 11. How do the triple factors, that is, knower, known and knowledge, which are absent in deep sleep, samadhi, etc., manifest themselves in the self in the states of waking and dreaming? From the self there arise in succession 1. Chidabhasa, reflected consciousness, which is a kind of luminosity. 2. Jiva, the individual consciousness or the seer or the first concept. 3. Phenomena, that is the world. 12. Since the self is free from the notions of knowledge and ignorance, how can it be said to pervade the entire body in the shape of sentience or to impart sentience to the senses? Wise men say that there is a connection between the source of the various psychic nerves and the self, that this is the knot of the heart, that the connection between the sentient and the insentient will exist until this is cut asunder with the aid of true knowledge, that just as the subtle and invisible force of electricity travels through wires and does many wonderful things, So the force of the self also travels through the psychic nerves and pervading the entire body imparts sentience to the senses, and that if this knot is cut, the self will remain as it always is without any attributes. 13. How can there be a connection between the self, which is pure knowledge, and the triple factors, which are relative knowledge? This is in a way like the working of a cinema. Just as the pictures appear on the screen as long as the film throws the shadows through the lens, so the phenomenal world will continue to appear to the individual in the waking and dream states as long as there are latent mental impressions. Just as the lens magnifies the tiny specks on the film to a huge size, and as a number of pictures are shown in a second, so the mind enlarges the sprout-like tendencies into tree-like thoughts and shows in a second innumerable worlds. Again, just as there is only the light of the lamp visible when there is no film, so the self alone shines without the triple factors when the mental concepts in the form of tendencies are absent in the state of deep sleep, swoon and samadhi. Just as the lamp illumines the light, etc., while remaining unaffected, the self illumines the ego, chidabhasa, etc., while remaining unaffected. Illustration: Cinema show and the self. 1. The lamp inside the apparatus is the self. 2. The lens in front of the lamp is the pure sattvic mind close to the self. 3. The film, which is a long series of separate photos, is the stream of latent tendencies consisting of subtle thoughts. 4. The lens, the light passing through it, and the lamp, which together form the focused light, is the mind, the illumination of it, and the self, which together form the seer or the jiva. 5. The light passing through the lens and falling on the screen is the light of the self emerging from the mind through the senses and falling on the world. 6. The various kinds of pictures appearing in the light of the screen is the various forms and names appearing as the objects perceived in the light of the world. 7. The mechanism which sets the film in motion is the divine law manifesting the latent tendencies of the mind. 14. What is dhyana, meditation? It is abiding as one's self without swerving in any way from one's real nature and without feeling that one is meditating. As one is not in the least conscious of the different states, waking, dreaming, etc., in this condition, the sleep noticeable here is also regarded as dhyana. 15. What is the difference between dhyana and samadhi? Dhyana is achieved through deliberate mental effort. In samadhi, there is no such effort. 16. What are the factors to be kept in view in dhyana? It is important for one who is established in his self, atmanishtha, to see that he does not swerve in the least from this absorption. By swerving from his true nature, he may see before him bright effulgences, etc., or hear unusual sounds, or regard as real the visions of gods appearing within or outside himself. He should not be deceived by these and forget himself. Note: if the moments that are wasted in thinking of the objects which are not the self are spent on enquiry into the self, self-realization will be attained in a very short time. Until the mind becomes established in itself, some kind of bhavana, contemplation of a personified god or goddess with deep emotion and religious feeling, is essential. Otherwise, the mind will be frequently assailed by wayward thoughts or sleep. Without spending all the time in practicing bhavanas like I am Shiva or I am Brahman, which are regarded as nirgunopasana, contemplation of the attributeless Brahman, the method of enquiry into oneself should be practiced as soon as the mental strength, which is the result of such upasana, contemplation, is attained. The excellence of the practice, sadhana, lies in not giving room for even a single mental concept, vritti. 17. What are the rules of conduct which an aspirant, sadhaka, should follow? Moderation in food, moderation in sleep, and moderation in speech. 18. How long should one practice? Until the mind attains effortlessly its natural state of freedom from concepts, that is, till the sense of I and mine exists no longer. 19. What is the meaning of dwelling in solitude, ekantavasa? As the self is all-pervasive, it has no particular place for solitude. The state of being free from mental concepts is called dwelling in solitude. 20. What is the sign of wisdom, viveka? Its beauty lies in remaining free from delusion after realizing the truth once. There is fear only for one who sees even a slight difference in the Supreme Brahman. So long as there is the idea that the body is the self, one cannot be a realizer of truth, whoever he might be. 21. If everything happens according to karma, prarabdha, the result of one's acts in the past, how is one to overcome the obstacles to meditation, dhyana? Prarabdha concerns only the outturned, not the interned mind. One who seeks his real self will not be afraid of any obstacle. 22. Is asceticism, sannyasa, one of the essential requisites for a person to become established in the self, atmanishta? The effort that is made to get rid of attachment to one's body is really towards abiding in the self. Maturity of thought and enquiry alone removes attachment to the body, not the stations of life, ashramas, such as student, brahmachari, etc. For the attachment is in the mind while the stations pertain to the body. How can bodily stations remove the attachment in the mind? As maturity of thought and enquiry pertain to the mind, these alone can, by enquiry on the part of the same mind, remove the attachments which have crept into it through thoughtlessness. But as the discipline of asceticism, sannyasashrama, is the means for attaining dispassion, vairagya, and as dispassion is the means for enquiry, joining an order of ascetics may be regarded in a way as a means of enquiry through dispassion. Instead of wasting one's life by entering the order of ascetics before one is fit for it, it is better to live the householder's life. In order to fix the mind in the self, which is its true nature, it is necessary to separate it from the family of fancies, sankalpas, and doubts, vikalpas, that is to renounce the family, samsara, in the mind. This is real asceticism. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya. Sarvam Sri Ramanarpanamastu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.